evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? I'm your host, James Ransom Reed Jr., and I've got a two-part show for you tonight. It's a show about humility. We have a very special guest here, the Reverend Daniel Cohen, who wrote a book on the subject. The book is It's Not All About You, The Secret Joy of Practical Humility. He is here to discuss this book and how he came to write it and why it is important for us to look at its contents and think about ourselves in ways that perhaps we don't ordinarily do so. So sit back tonight, really, relax, get your favorite partner or your favorite refreshment, and learn something tonight. Be a part of the show. Be an active listener. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the author of that book, Pastor Dan Cohen. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Thank you so much, buddy. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you're doing so they'll be oriented properly to know about a bit about your background.
Okay, so sure you know that I'm Daniel Aaron Cohen, nice Jewish boy who wound up becoming a Christian pastor, but that's another story for another day.
That's another story.
We did actually talk a little bit about that in a previous session. So I am going to talk a little bit today. We're going to talk about the book, It's Not All About You, The Secret Joy of Practical Humility. And, it's one of these things that took me a long time to work on. I spent over a decade, researching and looking at other books and trying to see if there was anything else out there like what I was doing, and there wasn't. So the only books I could find about humility always came from a religious base, and they were like, the story of David and Goliath or something. And there wasn't really sort of a, as somebody called it, a tour de force about humility.
All right.
And even the classic on humility was a book called, Humility by a guy named Andrew Murray. And, that was a really good book, but it was very short and, it didn't sort of, I guess, sort of discuss all the ways we could be humble and all of the different paths that there were to humility. And that's what I began to discover as I researched. I'm the son of a scientist, so we kind of tend to, approach things, very systematically, I guess, and in depth. And so it turned out that this was what I call a path with heart for me. So it was something that I really delved into. So, while I was doing my regular job, I was working as a social worker with the state of Connecticut. So I'm a psychotherapist in private practice, in addition to being the designated term pastor at Congregational Church of Burlington, where I've been for about 2.5 years. That's Burlington, Connecticut. And also, I really got into the writing of this, and it was a lot of work, and it really, there's no way around it. And of course, that's what makes life wonderful, is when you find something that's a path with heart, and you work at it, and you really give it your all. And then that, it's pleasing to you, it's pleasing to God, and, it's great to be on those paths. Now, there have been times in my life when I wasn't on a path with heart. And I know and recognize that those are times that people get depressed or anxious, and that happens. But anyway, with the book, I basically came to see that one of the things I realized was that it turns out that there's more definitions of humility than there are New Yorkers with opinions. And, I didn't realize that at first, but I came up with one that I particularly like, which is that humility is three things. It's one, putting yourself in perspective, which is not to think too high, too low, or too often of yourself. And that's what this book is about, and the 70 humility paths here. And the other is that, or the other two are, that the second thing is that it's accepting everything you don't like about life but cannot change. And that's the book I'm working on now. It's going to be called Being Okay and Being Okay with Not Being Okay. But that's what I'm working on now. And then the third one, which eventually I hope to work on, which is being thankful for everything you do like about life. And if you use that broad definition, it kind of covers everything in life. So some people will say to me, well, Dan, you can be too humble. And I'd say, well, it depends on your definition. Because if you define it like that, you can't be too humble, because part of that first definition about putting yourself in perspective is to not think too high, too low, or too often of yourself. So if you're including the fact that humility means not thinking too low of yourself, then you don't have to worry about being too humble. And I've also come to feel that, humility is like a spirit. And maybe it's just Jesus' spirit or God's spirit or the Holy Spirit, but there's something special, and I don't feel it all the time. But when I remind myself, it can go months even without feeling it, and I remind myself to feel the humility. It's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. And I even started to call her a she. This is the spirit of humility. And when you're feeling humble, you're at peace. You're not trying to prove anything to anyone. And you're just happy to be on earth, giving love that you get from God to others. And you don't even have to believe in God to be humble. And that's what I like about the book. The book is saying, let's hopefully make people more humble. That'll make them better people, and it'll make them happier. So that's kind of one of the things that I talk about in terms of the equation, right? Which is that people happiness is better than money, because people say they want money in order to be happy. Now, money may or may not make them happy, but the reason they want the money is to be happy, right? So humility will make you happy, but it will also make you a better person. Because when you're humble, you're nicer to other people, and you're also reflecting God's humility and spirit in yourself.
So in effect, you become the change you want to see in the world?
Absolutely. Right? I mean, if we had more people being, and I'm not saying people aren't humble. There are many people who are humble, right? And it's all, it's not an either or. Even the most arrogant person has some humility. Even the most humble person has some arrogance, right? But there are moments when, as a Christian, I can channel Christ. And at that moment, I am completely humble. But that doesn't mean there won't be another moment, since I'm human, where I won't be.
Wow. We haven't even scratched the surface of the book yet. Goodness gracious. I just wonder about modern society today, right? What in the world is going on? I mean, in terms of how we are disconnected from each other, and can humility bridge that gap, or is that an avenue for us to connect? What is going on in modern society today?
Well, there's a lot, right? One question that people think of is, was there a time when humility was really being practiced?
Yes, I do. I wonder about that.
Right. And I would say that at all times, there were some who were practicing humility and some who weren't, right? There's this idea that, we're sort of social animals, right, as human beings. So we started out, we're kind of hardwired to be in tribes of 40 or something, because we were that way for a long time.
Yes.
Right? So there is a social aspect of us, but there's also the selfish aspect of we're consciousness in one body. So, unless we have an out-of-body experience where we connect with others, there's the me, and we think of ourselves, right? So, things that are going on in the world, it's like, yes, the more people can be humble, the more people will get along with each other. Because, the first 16 humility paths in the book, and the way the book is structured, there's, a preface about why I wrote the book, an introduction about what humility is and why it's so valuable, and then a section on why we're so far away from it as a society. And then there's the 70 humility paths, right? And they're broken down into different areas too, but the first 16 are especially good for dealing with people, right? We're talking about things like recognizing other people are other us, other me's, right? That you're a me too, but you happen to have a different history and different DNA, right? And that can help you to, accept somebody else's bad behavior and, forgiving and not judging, those kind of things. So that can be very helpful. But, when it comes to sort of the global issues that we face, we have to learn to really appreciate other people and their views and values and not think of ourselves as being superior and our ideas as being superior. And there was one of the paths I wrote, it's called, I think it's path, I'm not sure what number it is, but it's the path of not thinking our political or religious beliefs are superior to others. And we have to remember that it's important to have religious beliefs because that's how we view God and our role on the universe. And it's important to have political beliefs because that's how we view how we treat others. But when we think ours are superior, and of course we do think that, and maybe they are, but you can't go around feeling superior to others and still be humble, and you can't go around feeling superior to others and treating them as inferior and thinking that that's going to be a way to create peace in the world. So we really have to respect other people where they're coming from. And, one of the tricks is to give the respect without needing to get the respect, right? I think there's the prayer of St. Francis. It's not in the book, but where he talks about, help me to seek to be a blessing rather than to be blessed, to seek to understand rather than to be understood, right? So it starts with us giving, and then we can worry about whether we get it back or not, but that's not up to us, right? What's within our control. And then that's another key to the book, is understanding what we can and cannot control. And what we can control is what we do and what we think. Right? But we can't control what other people do and think. But if we are giving out the right vibe and the right message, things will tend to come back to us, and that goes back to the law of karma, or in Christianity, reap what you sow, right? So in general, even though it's true sometimes bad things happen to good people,
absolutely,
in general, yes, when people are nice and behaving well, they generally get blessed. And that's because other people, if you're humble, other people will want to help you. And if you're humble, God will want to help you. For it says that he exalts the humble and resists the proud.
Mm-hmm. I had a guy say to me once, Jim, you can't take humble to the bank. Wow. We should get him a copy of this book. Don't you think? But he was talking from a financial perspective, obviously. And we value money in America. Let's be realistic. We view successful people as being rich people. That's financially very wealthy. That's our view of success. And I would argue that that's wrong. I would argue that the true wealth comes from within and what you share with others. That would be my way of looking at it. In other words, I have a bunch of friends. I don't have a lot of money in the bank, but I have a bunch of friends that I know I can count on when I need them and I'm down. I have people who have dealt with depression in my family. I've had people who are gay, lesbian in my family. Being humble, having humility is a cultural phenomenon as much as it is anything else, I would think. Because my culture shapes me, does it not? I mean, that's where I come from, right? That's my parameters, right? I came from a religious background. Both of my parents, deeply Bible-thumping, lightning-striking Baptists. That's where I came from. I learned, I think, what humility was. And it was actually to treat your fellow man as you want it to be treated, in simple terms. What do you think?
So absolutely, there's actually a lot to unpack in that statement.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, first of all, I would argue that having a humble workforce actually has been shown to add to your bottom line. When people are behaving humbly, right, towards each other in the workforce, then you have less turnover, right? People aren't going to want to leave so much, and there's less backbiting and less fighting. So I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think there are statistics that say, either humble or happy or whatever, but those kind of things make for a improved bottom line. Second of all, we've got millionaires and billionaires who commit suicide. So obviously, money does not always make you happy. I was raised in a non-religious, my uncle is a rabbi and my grandfather had a paper that was the Jewish Post and Opinion, but my parents raised me as secular Jews who were not believing in God.
Okay.
And yet I still found God, or God found me. And, so we can rise above our particular backgrounds. Of course, I learned a lot of great Jewish values as a child, right? Nonviolence, social justice, all of these things. So it wasn't like, and my father gave me a great work ethic, and my mother, she was a legal aid lawyer, and she gave me a love for people and to help people. So yes, obviously, right, we do get stuff from early on, but not always everything that we learn, right? There's other things that we get into in life. And, I would say that, you want ultimately to be happy. That's, super important. But you also want to spread that happiness. And, if you become humble and you share your gifts and you share your love, and we talk about success, I recently preached on the idea that the term of the sermon was redefining success. And redefining success meant, instead of thinking about all the things on your to-do list that you could cross off in a day.
Yes.
A successful day was not crossing things off as much as it was staying connected to God, to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit, however you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. But staying connected, reminding myself right now that God is watching over me and taking care of me,
As we sit here.
As we sit here, right. Mm-hmm. So that connection, is, now a way to define success. Of course, I still want to cross things off my to-do list.
Of course.
And it still feels good,
yeah,
right, to do that.
Yeah.
But, and when it comes to money, it's like, you have to remember that some of this stuff is programmed into us. One of the things I'm proudest of in my book on humility, I know it's really funny that I'm proud of something in my book on humility.
Right. You can be proud. That's okay. It's good.
Was the idea that there are these two questions that we have us asking ourselves. What can I get out of life, and am I getting enough? And what do other people think of me? And we're always asking these questions to ourselves, and they do drive the economy. Right? 2/3 of the economy is based on consumer spending. And so we're thinking these questions. And of course, what can I get out of life? Well, am I getting enough? I got to get stuff. And what do other people think of me? Well, I got to keep up with the Joneses, right? But really, it's not like somebody is sitting, like a bunch of old men sitting around going, we'll make them think that. It's just kind of a natural thing that comes around, with human beings, right? But you can change them to what can I give to life, and am I giving enough, and what does God think of me? Or if you don't believe in God, what do I think of me? And then that's a quantum leap.
Well, I was going to go back to that because you said you don't need to believe in God to be humble,
right,
to have humility. You don't need to believe at all. Now, I know my audience out there listening, viewing us, I would hope many of them can grasp the concept that we're talking about. It's complicated, humility, and how we find it, how we balance it, and how we live our lives as such. I'm going to use a quote here. Dr. King said, "We live in a world of guided missiles and misguided men." How do we turn this around?
Wow, don't ask me for much, do you?
Well, that's why I get the special people here.
Sure, I wrote a book on humility, but does that mean I can solve the world's problems?
Well, give us your shot.
Well, look, again, it comes back to really being able to love and appreciate each other.
Now, what is that? What love? What are you talking about, love? What is it? What is it?
What is love? That's a question I never have been asked before, so I never thought of that one. But love is a deep affection for someone or something, right?
Yep.
So it's funny in a way that in this world that we live in, there's only one word in English for love, right? I mean, the Eskimos have 40 words for snow. And, even the Greeks had a bunch of different words for love, right? There was agape, there was philia.
Eros,
right.
Yeah, right.
So, it's a weird thing. But, to solve the problems of the world, we have to look at other people and say, whatever they're going through, I could be them. I could be them going through that.
You mean, but for the grace of God?
Not for the grace of God, but also just this idea that, if there's poor people in the world and I'm rich, I should share some of my wealth, because...
So wait a minute, I got it on my own. They didn't help me. No, that's the thinking process.
Right, but of course nobody ever does get it on their own, right?
Because that's where I'm going.
Look, somebody has a $1 billion business, right? Well, how could they have a $1 billion business if there weren't people to buy things from them?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
How could they get their stuff from one place to the other if there weren't roads? Right? I mean, we're social animals.
We're interdependent.
Like we talked about. Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, even if I don't get anything out of giving you something, I should still give it to you if I have it and you need it. Because in some level, I will. I believe we talked a little bit before about karma, or you reap what you sow. So in the end, of course, you will get rewarded. But that's not why you do it, because if you do it for a reward, you get less good karma than you do if you do it for the reason of just wanting to help someone else out.
So people are watching and they're saying they're hearing you say that there's a feeling you get when you give that you don't ordinarily have if you just retain things for yourself, right?
Well, that's an extra thing you added, which is a great addition, right? Right? There's the feeling of love that if you have it, you can give it to others, right? In other words, I started reading a book called The Meaning of Marriage.
Okay.
And basically he says, Tim Keller, who wrote the book, he's a pastor, that we go around with marriage with the wrong idea. We're looking for the partner to make us happy. And what we should be doing is learning to serve them. That marriage is not easy. That you don't go on a tennis court and expect to be Novak Djokovic or Serena Williams the first time you hit a ball, right? And the same is true with marriage. And that's important because I deal with couples and I have a marriage of my own. So the key is that he says you've got to have God's love coming through you that you give to your partner, right? So, that's the key. Right? And then you just added to it, which is to say when you do give, you feel something good. So that just increases the cycle of love that you're creating.
Wow. I can't wait for the second part of this. That's all we have for this portion of my interview with Reverend Daniel Cohen on his book, It's Not All About You. Until next time, everybody has a story. What's yours? I'm your host, James Ransom Reed, Jr. Good night.
Sometimes life just happens. Don't worry. Farmington Motorsports will get you back on the road and at a fair price. From towing to tires, emissions to transmissions.
Our ASC certified techs do it all.
Farmington Motorsports is a family-run business. We're a Napa Auto Center and AAA approved. We work on all makes and models from preventative maintenance to major repairs.
And every repair is backed by our 2-year, 24,000-mile nationwide warranty.
When life happens to you, don't worry. Farmington Motorsports.
Follow us on Instagram at nutmeg.tv.